What are these? I'm sure you've asked this question, and you've probably heard at least one of your students ask it too. Even someone who's played drums for a long time, if they haven't played in a jazz style, they might not know what to do with brushes. That's what these things are, brushes. They're made up of a bunch of small wires bound together that retract into a sleeve, which is where we hold them. Now you might be thinking, why did we have to make this more complicated? You already have sticks. Isn't that good enough? Well, think of it the same way you'd think of mutes for a brass player or maybe pizzicato for a violinist. It doesn't work all the time, but it's nice to have that extra texture. And that's exactly what brushes do for the drum set. Just as a little demo, here's what happens if I play each part of the drum set with brushes, and then I'm going to follow it up with sticks. Tell me you don't hear a difference here. Totally different sounds, right? So that's why we care about the brushes. But these things scare people. They might scare you, and they certainly scare the drummer in your junior high school jazz band, probably even the high school one. Why do they scare people? Because you have to play the drums with these really different than how you would play with sticks. And not a lot of people are taught this unless they take private lessons. It's a lot less intuitive, and for a lot of the younger kids, it feels a lot less fun. But we can put the fun back into brushes, and you can use this texture in your jazz band. Let's be honest here. When we're in junior high and high school, we're really not looking for much more than just a steady beat that the band can understand, and we're looking for this other texture. So there's two beats that a drummer needs to be able to play in a jazz band to be functional with the brushes. We're going to tackle the first one today after we go through how to hold them and how to move with these things in your hands. So a lot of people hold brushes traditional grip, even if they never play that way with sticks. This comes from just a tradition. People have done this like this for a really long time. You don't have to play traditional with brushes. Whether you play traditional with sticks or not doesn't really matter. If your student doesn't have access to private lessons, traditional grip is a lot less intuitive, and in my experience, a lot more of my drummer friends that have carpal tunnel and tendonitis tend to be big traditional grip players rather than matched. Fight me on it in the comments, whatever, this is my opinion, but it is easier to play matched, yes, even with brushes. I'll demonstrate both ways so you can see both ways, but I personally play matched. So we want to hold these the same way we would hold sticks, really. You're holding on a lot with your thumb and first finger, and the rest of your fingers are wrapped around as support. You have a little bit sticking out the back of your hand. On a stick, you'd have, an inch or so, depending on the stick and the person. But on this, I kind of tend to have the end of the rubber and then the little loop sticking out of the back of my hand at the end. Now, when we go to hit stuff with brushes, there's kind of two ways to hit stuff too, two main ways. Obviously, there's more than that. The first way is to just use these like you would use sticks. That's fine, and it works well in some contexts, but what makes brushes special is their ability to make a long sound. The way we do this is by moving more horizontally instead of vertically. So instead of up and down, we're going side to side, and we drag the tip of our wires across a drum like this. Now, if you've been around a jazz context, you've probably heard someone refer to playing brushes as stirring the pot, stirring soup. You hear all these kind of metaphors. That comes from this horizontal movement that we use. A lot of people find that using a circle makes the most sense and allows for the most intuitive movement. So the first thing we want to do with the brushes is get either kind of the tips and the first inch or so of this touching the head of the drum. And this is not like super high pressure. We're not trying to shove the whole brush into the drum. We also don't want super loose pressure. We don't want it to be like just barely anything. We want a little bit in the middle. So hold your hand not quite parallel to the drum head, but almost. And then we want to just drag our hand in a circle. Same thing with the other hand. This is how this might look traditional. Now, this doesn't quite sound like a beat yet, but that's the fundamental movement we're after here. Big circles on the drum. We want to take up as much real estate on the head as we can without getting our wires caught in the edge here. So that gives us a nice big sound. Little circles is quieter, which is fine, but if you're playing with 18 other people like you are in a big band, you want the volume. Now, lots of people do these circles differently. Brushes are super personal to the drummer. Some people like to go scooping in with their circles, bringing it towards them. Some people like to go out. Some people like to go parallel with their hands. Some people like to go perpendicular, whether that's in or out. So I would suggest a good exercise for a student who's new to brushes is to practice making circles with each hand independently first, going in some and out some. Feel how that feels for both hands. Something will feel easier or better eventually, even if it's not obvious at first. Me personally, I prefer to bring both arms in. So I'm going to show you what that looks like if I were to just make circles with one hand and then the other again. Okay, so now once the student has kind of figured out what feels right to them, inside or outside, parallel or perpendicular, now we're ready to start putting both hands on the same drum. Remember, I mentioned there's 2 grooves we need to know. This first one is for a ballad. Think Little Darlin' or what's another good one? Body and Soul. Think Misty, Skylark, all these jazz standards. A ballad is a super slow tune. They're often sung, but the beat is like 40 to 80. That's the sort of thing we want to focus on for today. Brushes for a ballad. When we're here, when we're new, and honestly, for me, in most of my gigging context, we want a steady beat. So the circle's great, but there's not a lot of steady beat about this. Kind of sounds like a white noise machine. To add that beat so that the band knows where on earth the drummer is, we are going to employ a little bit more pressure and a little bit more speed to get a slightly different sound for our beat. You hear that? For me, it happens when I get about to this region of the drum. It's a combination of a little bit more pressing down and a flick of the wrist. So this is where I'm talking about the horizontal movement again. We've been using our arms for a lot of this because it helps to kind of move a little bigger. But for that accented beat that we want, you want to move more from the wrist. Sometimes you might see Ari Honig playing. This is the one time I'll ever tell people to put their finger on the side of the stick. If it helps you to get that thwack with the brushes, all right, it's a gray area, do it. But the next thing we want to practice is getting that thwack on the beat in the same spot of the circle every time. snagging there. I need to work on my left hand. So then once we can do that, now we have to figure out how to make these two hands exist together on the snare without running into each other all crazy. So for a lot of people, that means you put one stick or one brush further up on the drum, one lower down. For me, I get this kind of concentric circle thing happening. My right hand goes on the outside, my left hand goes on the inside. If I was a lefty, it might feel more comfortable to be this way. But they're operating with both hands getting as big of a circle as we can without running into each other or the rim of the drum head. And that looks like this. So when we give this exercise to a student, the first thing we want them to focus on is finding a way to hold the brushes and move that feels comfortable and somewhat more intuitive to them. So whether that's traditional or matched, or in, out, whatever combination of those they choose. The second thing we want them to do is to practice getting that push, that accent, that beat right in time with the metronome. And it needs to fall in around the same place on the drum head every time. We want an even speed, one circle per beat. That's that. Once we get there, it's a matter of adding the hi-hat on 2 and 4, and we have a very respectable ballad beat. Show you. Now I'll show you what this sounds like with a recording of one of my favorite ballads. This tune is called Misty. This is an Oscar Peterson trio recording. I'll just play it out for 30 seconds or so you can see and hear what this looks like in the context of a real ballad.